You'll never amount to anything, just like always. Jake's voice was sharp and filled with malice. The words cut through the sterile silence of the hospital room like a blade. He stood there tall, his arms crossed, looking down at me with that familiar sneer plastered across his face. His expensive suit, polished shoes, and the faint scent of his cologne were almost theatrical, as if he had prepared himself to put on a show. I shifted in my hospital bed, my body encased in casts, barely able to move. Every inch of me ached. But the physical pain paled in comparison to the anger boiling inside me. I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears. I forced myself to speak. "Is that why you're here, Jake?" My voice came out weaker than I wanted. I hated that. To gloat? Jake chuckled, the sound cold and condescending. He took a step closer, standing over me now, his shadow falling across my broken body. "You're not worth gloating over, Alex," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I've already won." My fingers twitched, the only part of me that could move without sending pain shooting through my limbs. I watched him carefully, his eyes dancing with a twisted satisfaction. He had been waiting for this moment, savoring it. I could see it in the way his grin widened as he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. "What are you doing, Jake?" I asked, dread creeping into my stomach. "You want to see something interesting?" he asked, ignoring me, his voice now dripping with mock excitement. He flicked through his phone for a moment, his expression smug as he found what he was looking for. "You'll love this." He shoved the phone in my face, the bright screen nearly blinding me. I squinted, and then the horror of what I was seeing hit me all at once. It was Megan, my wife. She was in our bedroom with no clothes, laughing, her face flushed with happiness. But she wasn't alone. Jake was there, too, sitting next to her on the bed, a glass of wine in hand. They were close, too close. And then, in one smooth, sickening motion, he leaned in and kissed her. Then they're doing the act with no shame. I recoiled, my stomach twisting in disgust, but Jake held the phone steady, forcing me to watch. "Jake, stop," I said, my voice trembling. But he didn't stop. He laughed, enjoying my reaction. "Come on, Alex. Don't be shy. Watch how talented your wife really is." The video continued. The two of them in my bed, the bed Megan and I had shared for years together like that. My body trembled, and I could feel bile rising in my throat. It felt like every part of me was collapsing, like the world was crashing down on top of me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. "Jake, you sick bastard," I screamed, or at least I tried. My voice cracked, my strength failing me. I could barely sit up, let alone get out of bed. "Easy, easy," Jake said, pulling the phone away. He looked at me, his eyes gleaming with a satisfaction that made my skin crawl. "She's good, isn't she?" He chuckled darkly, pocketing the phone. How could you do this?" I spat, my throat burning from the effort. My body ached, but the betrayal, their betrayal, felt like a knife twisting deeper with every second that passed. "How could I not?" Jake replied, shrugging like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You know, Alex, I always envied you. The big house, the fast cars, the perfect wife. You had everything handed to you. And me? I had to scrape by while you basked in the spotlight." He paused, his eyes narrowing as he leaned down closer to me. "But now you're nothing." I clenched my fists, wanting to strike him, to do something, but I was helpless. Immobilized. My body was a prison, and Jake reveled in it. He straightened, slipping his hands back into his pockets, still smirking. "I always envied you, but now you're a pathetic cripple, lying here, and I'll make sure you rot in this hospital bed," he continued, his voice thick with triumph. "And me? I'm living in your luxury house, driving your sports cars, and best of all, I'm sleeping with your hot wife. She was easy to take, by the way. All I had to do was make her feel special, something you clearly weren't doing." His words hit like a sledgehammer. I gritted my teeth, my vision blurring from the rage. "You're a monster," I growled, barely able to get the words out. Jake only smiled. "Monster? No, Alex. I'm just smart. I saw an opportunity, and I took it. Megan? She deserves better than you. Hell, she wanted better than you." The room felt like it was closing in on me. I couldn't think straight, couldn't breathe. All I could see was the image of Megan with Jake laughing, touching him like she used to touch me. The betrayal, the pain, it all consumed me. Jake checked his watch casually, as if he hadn't just torn my life apart. "Well, I should be going," he said, turning towards the door. "I've got a meeting with the realtor tomorrow. Thinking about selling the house. You won't be needing it when you're stuck in here forever." He glanced back at me one last time, his grin returning. "You should stay here, Alex. Get comfortable. Rot in your misery. I'll make sure you never walk again." I stared at him, unable to speak, my mind reeling from the cruelty of it all. Without another word, Jake walked out, leaving me in the suffocating silence of the hospital room. The door clicked shut behind him, the sound final, like a coffin being sealed. For a long time, I lay there, staring at the ceiling. My body, wrapped in bandages and casts, felt like a cage. The machines around me beeped steadily, a reminder of my broken state. But it wasn't the accident that had left me shattered. It was them, Megan and Jake. The people I had trusted most in the world had stripped me of everything, my marriage, my home, my life. I wanted to scream, to cry, to destroy something. But I couldn't. All I could do was lie there, powerless. Then, slowly, the initial shock began to fade, replaced by something darker. The pain was still there, burning in my chest, but beneath it, something else was growing. Something cold, a rage unlike anything I had ever felt. It built quietly at first, but then it grew, swelling inside me until it was all I could think about. They thought I was finished. They thought I was broken. They were wrong. I wasn't done yet. And when I got out of that bed, when I was strong again, I would make them pay for every second of this hell. The weeks that followed the betrayal were a blur of pain, frustration, and silence. My body, still shattered from the accident, was a daily reminder of my helplessness. But what weighed on me more was the knowledge of what Jake and Megan had done. The image of that video played on a loop in my head, haunting me day and night. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my hands clenched, ready to tear the world apart. But I was trapped in my own broken body. "Mr. Williams," the voice of my physical therapist, Rebecca, interrupted my thoughts one morning. She stood at the foot of my bed, clipboard in hand, a serious look on her face. "We'll start with light exercises today." I nodded, not saying a word. Talking felt pointless now. All I cared about was getting out of this hospital and reclaiming my life. She adjusted the weights on my legs, her hands moving with precision. "We're going to start slow," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "I know it's tough, but you've made progress. Let's focus on getting you to stand." I gritted my teeth as the pain shot through my legs the moment I tried to move. It felt like my muscles were on fire, but I pushed through it. There was no other option. Each small lift of my leg sent waves of agony through my body, but I welcomed the pain. It reminded me I was still alive, and that I had something to fight for. "Good, Alex," Rebecca encouraged, her eyes on my legs as I struggled to move. "Just a little more." Sweat dripped down my face. My arms trembled as I gripped the sides of the bed for balance. I wasn't just fighting to stand. I was fighting against the urge to give up. Every muscle screamed for me to stop, but I wouldn't. I couldn't. After what felt like hours, Rebecca called it a day. "We'll pick up again tomorrow," she said, offering a small smile as she packed up her equipment. "You're doing great." I didn't respond. My focus was elsewhere. Megan hadn't visited, not even once. I half expected her to show up, to pretend she cared, but I knew better. She was busy living her new life with Jake, no doubt spending the money I earned, driving my cars, sleeping in my bed. After Rebecca left, I lay there, drenched in sweat, staring at the ceiling. My thoughts swirled, dark and bitter. How long had this been going on? How had I not seen it? The betrayal was a wound that cut deeper than anything the car accident had done to me. A knock on the door pulled me out of my thoughts. One of the nurses walked in, holding a stack of letters. "More mail for you, Mr. Williams." "Thanks," I muttered, taking the stack from her. As soon as she left, I flipped through the letters. Bills. Bank notices. One from Jake. I tore it open, the paper trembling in my hands as I read his smug words. "Alex, hope the hospital bed's treating you well. Megan and I are thinking about selling the house. You won't need it when you're stuck there forever. We're planning a vacation too. Don't worry about anything back here. I've got it all handled. Cheers, Jake. My grip tightened on the letter, crumpling it in my hands. Rage surged through me, more intense than the pain in my legs. I could almost hear his voice taunting me, feel his smirk as he wrote those words. I grabbed my phone, barely able to type with the shaking in my hands, but I managed to pull up my bank account. I stare at the numbers in disbelief. The balance was draining fast. Jake had been siphoning money from my accounts. The reality of my situation hit me like a punch to the gut. He wasn't just sleeping with my wife, he was actively destroying my life. For a moment, I thought about throwing the phone across the room, but I stopped myself. Anger wasn't enough. I needed a plan. Fine, I muttered under my breath. You want to take everything? Let's see how far you get. From that moment on, my recovery wasn't just about walking again. It was about getting my life back and making them pay. The days dragged on, each one more grueling than the last. Rebecca pushed me hard, harder than I thought I could go, but I never complained. Every step, every stretch was one step closer to regaining control. The pain became something I embraced, something I needed. You're improving faster than expected, Rebecca said one afternoon as I managed to stand for the first time. My legs wobbled, the muscles weak and unfamiliar with emotion, but I was standing. I nodded, still gripping the bars for balance. Sweat poured down my face, but I didn't care. Standing, even for a few seconds, felt like a victory. I could feel my strength coming back bit by bit. But Jake's messages didn't stop. Every week, a new letter would arrive, each one more smug, more vicious than the last. He'd send pictures of the house, of him and Megan, living the life I was supposed to have. One letter even came with photos of them in the sports car I used to drive, laughing as they took it for a joyride. It was like they were taunting me, daring me to fight back when they thought I couldn't. Still rotting in that bed? Jake's most recent message said, Megan and I are thinking of moving soon. Maybe you can visit once you're better, if that ever happens. Don't rush, though. My hands shook as I read it. I clenched the letter so hard the paper tore. I'll show you, I whispered, crumpling the letter and tossing it aside. I'll show both of you. Months passed, and I grew stronger. Each step I took in physical therapy felt like another piece of me coming back. The pain was still there, but it was bearable now, something I could use to fuel my resolve. One evening, after an especially brutal session, I collapsed onto my bed, drenched in sweat. The exhaustion was bone deep, but I welcomed it. It meant I was closer to getting out, closer to being free. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I ignored it at first, too tired to care, but then it buzzed again. With a groan, I reached for it and saw another message from Jake. Still rotting, bro? Megan and I are thinking of selling the house. You won't need it when you're stuck in that bed forever. Cheers. The words blurred as my vision darkened with rage. I clutched the phone so tightly I thought it would shatter in my hand. My heart pounded, my breaths coming in sharp bursts. The walls of the hospital room seemed to close in around me. They think I'm done, I whispered to myself, my voice low and dangerous. They think I'll just fade away. I set the phone down carefully, my hands still shaking. The fire inside me burned brighter than ever. I wasn't going to let them win. Jake and Megan believed I was weak, that I was stuck here while they lived the life they had stolen from me. But they were wrong. I could feel it, my strength, my determination. It was all coming back. And when I got out of this bed, when I was finally free, I would make them regret every second they had tried to destroy me. The first step out of that hospital, with the world outside the doors welcoming me back, felt like stepping into a new life. A year had passed since the accident. A year of relentless therapy, quiet fury, and meticulous planning. Every agonizing step I'd taken had been driven by the singular thought of reclaiming what was mine and making Jake and Megan pay for everything they'd done. Now I was ready. Jake's smug messages had grown fewer over the months. The arrogance he once flaunted had faded, replaced with complacency. He and Megan had fallen into the false belief that I was gone for good, that they had successfully erased me from my own life. That was their mistake. With my legs regained and my mind sharper than ever, I returned home quietly. No grand announcements, no alerts to their comfortable little world. I had the legal papers, the proof of ownership. The house was still mine, and Jake hadn't bothered to cover his tracks well. His arrogance would be his undoing. I spent weeks preparing my move. I hired private investigators to dig up everything, leaving no stone unturned. They found what I had suspected all along. Jake had not only stolen my wife, he had been siphoning money from my business for months, leveraging his position as my brother to cover up his tracks. Megan was complicit, her hands just as dirty. I had everything I needed, and the time had come. It was a quiet evening when I finally returned to my house to surprise them. They didn't sell it yet. No grand entrance, no fanfare, just a man walking into the home that had been stolen from him. The cool evening air nipped at my skin as I pushed open the front door, the weight of the moment pressing on my chest. Inside, laughter echoed from the dining room. Jake and Megan, sitting comfortably at the dinner table, sharing a bottle of wine. The scene made my stomach churn. As I walked into the room, their laughter died instantly. "You two look cozy," I said, stepping into the light. The sound of my voice froze the air in the room. Jake's fork clattered onto his plate, and Megan's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide in shock. "Alex," Megan gasped, standing so abruptly her chair scraped against the floor. You're walking?" Jake's face drained of color, his bravado evaporating in an instant. "What the hell are you doing here?" he barked, trying to regain his composure. "You can't just walk in." "Oh, I can, and I did." I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. I could see the panic rising in his eyes. The power dynamic had shifted. "But don't worry, I'm not staying long. This house? It's going on the market. The cars? Repossessed." I stepped closer, watching as the weight of my words sank in. Megan's face had gone pale, her eyes darting between Jake and me, searching for an explanation, a way out of the nightmare she suddenly found herself in. "And as for the two of you," I pulled a thick folder from my jacket and tossed it onto the dining table with a thud. It slid across the surface, landing in front of them. "This is just the beginning." Jake hesitated, glancing at the folder before flipping it open. Inside was everything: bank statements, messages, photos, proof of their affair, and even more damning evidence of Jake's embezzlement. Megan stood frozen, her face turning an ashen shade as she read the documents over Jake's shoulder. "This is insane," Jake muttered, but the fear in his voice betrayed him. He flipped through the pages faster now, his hands trembling. "How did you—" "I know everything, Jake. I've been watching you for months," I said, my voice steady. "While you thought I was rotting away, I was planning. Every dollar you took from me, every lie you spun, it's all in that file." Megan sat back down, her legs giving out as the reality of the situation hit her. "Alex, please," she started, her voice shaking, but I cut her off. "Please what, Megan? Forgive you? Forget that you and my brother destroyed everything I built? My home, my marriage, my life?" I leaned forward, my eyes boring into hers. "You made your choices." Jake was pacing now, running his hand through his hair, a desperate look on his face. "Look, we can talk about this, Alex. I mean, we're family, right?" He let out a nervous laugh, but there was no conviction in it. I shook my head, my expression cold. "You stopped being family the day you walked into my house and took everything from me." He glared at me then, anger flaring up behind his eyes. "You think you can just come in here and ruin us? You can't do this. You have no proof." I smirked, stepping back as I gestured to the thick file. "That's where you're wrong. I have everything I need. The affair, the embezzlement, it's all there. And I've already spoken to the authorities. By the time I'm done, you'll have nothing left." Megan's voice broke through the tense silence, her words trembling. "Alex, please don't do this. We can do something to fix this." I turned to her, feeling the weight of her words. She had always been good at playing the victim, but I wasn't falling for it anymore. "You had a chance to fix this. You made your choice when you climbed into bed with him. Now you're going to live with the consequences." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Jake stood there, defeated, no longer the smug, confident man who had mocked me from my hospital bed. He knew there was no way out, No escape from the storm that was coming. I moved toward the door, leaving the file on the table, the evidence of their destruction laid bare in front of them. I could destroy you both, I said, pausing at the threshold. And I will, but not all at once. Megan's voice cracked. What? What do you mean? I looked back at them, my expression unreadable. You're going to lose everything, I said slowly, letting the words sink in. Piece by piece, just like I did, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. I didn't wait for their response. I walked out of the house, the weight of the past year lifting off my shoulders with every step I took. They thought they had taken everything from me, but they had underestimated me from the beginning. The house, the money, the cars, they didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the look on their faces as they realized that their perfect little world was crumbling, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. And I was just getting started. The weeks after my confrontation with Jake and Megan were a slow, calculated unraveling of their lives. It began with frozen bank accounts. Jake's smug face must have twisted in disbelief the moment he realized he couldn't access the money he'd been siphoning from my business for over a year. Without those funds, the luxury cars, the extravagant dinners, the designer clothes, all of it became a heavy burden they could no longer afford. I watched from a distance, ensuring every piece of the plan fell into place. The private investigators I had hired had been thorough, uncovering not just the affair, but every shady deal, every misappropriated fund, every fraud Jake had committed while sitting comfortably in my home. One morning, I sat in a small cafe, sipping my coffee when my phone buzzed. It was the notification I had been waiting for, a news alert about Jake Williams, my brother, being arrested on charges of embezzlement. The investigation had reached its peak, and the authorities finally had everything they needed. I could picture the moment perfectly. Jake, sitting in his office, thinking he was untouchable when the police arrived to drag him out in handcuffs. The image brought a small smile to my face. Later that day, I drove past the house that was once mine. The for sale sign swayed gently in the front yard. Megan stood on the porch, phone in hand, looking frantic. Her once meticulously styled hair now hung in disarray, and her once flawless makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes. She was talking to someone, likely a realtor, desperately trying to salvage what little she could from the crumbling remains of her life. I parked my car a block away, hidden from her view, and watched for a while. Megan, who had once paraded around in luxury, now looked like a shell of the woman she used to be. Without Jake's money, my money, her life of comfort was over. Her credit cards had been maxed out, and she had no idea what was coming next. As she ended her call, she stood on the porch for a moment, staring at the house. She looked lost, defeated. Then, without warning, she sank onto the steps, burying her face in her hands. A wave of emotion washed over me, but it wasn't pity. It was something else, something more satisfying. I could have walked away then, but I decided against it. There was one final conversation we needed to have. I stepped out of my car and walked up to the house. The sound of my footsteps on the driveway caught Megan's attention, and she looked up. Her eyes widened as I approached, her body tensing. "Alex," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She stood up, looking around as if hoping someone else would appear to save her from this encounter. But there was no one. "Megan," I replied, my tone steady. I stopped a few feet from her, hands in my pockets. "You look different." She swallowed hard, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and desperation. "I didn't know you'd come back," she stammered, her voice shaky. I nodded. "I didn't plan on it. But then again, things change, don't they?" She flinched at the double meaning behind my words. For a moment, we stood in silence. She shifted uncomfortably, her hands fidgeting as if she was unsure of what to say next. Then, in a voice laced with panic, she spoke. "Jake, he didn't mean to." She stopped herself, realizing how hollow the words sounded. I raised an eyebrow. "He didn't mean to what, Megan? Steal my money? Destroy my life? Sleep with my wife?" My voice remained calm, but the edge in my tone was unmistakable. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked away. "I'm sorry, Alex. I never wanted things to end like this." Her voice cracked, but I could tell that even in her apology, there was no real remorse. only regret for the situation she found herself in. Sorry, I repeated, my gaze hard. You're sorry now that everything's falling apart? Sorry that Jake's going to prison, and your life of luxury is over. I stepped closer, my eyes locking with hers. You had plenty of chances to walk away, Megan. But you didn't. You made your bed, and now you're lying in it. She wiped away a tear, shaking her head. I didn't know it would go this far. I didn't know he was stealing from you. Don't. I interrupted, my voice cold. Don't insult me by pretending you didn't know what was going on. You knew exactly what you were doing. You made your choice. Megan opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She looked like she wanted to plead with me, to ask for something, but she didn't know what. The power she once held over me was gone. She was vulnerable, exposed, and she knew it. I'm not here to argue with you, Megan, I said, turning away from her and glancing at the house. I just came to see how it all turned out for you. She stepped toward me, reaching out. Alex, wait. I turned back to face her, my expression unreadable. No, Megan, there's nothing left to say. I looked her in the eyes one last time, and in that moment I saw everything, the lies, the betrayal, the guilt. She was a broken woman, trapped in the consequences of her own choices. I walked back to my car, leaving her standing on the porch, tears silently streaming down her face. I had no more anger left for her, no more desire for revenge. I had done what I set out to do. Jake was behind bars, and Megan was left with nothing. Their perfect little world had crumbled, and they had no one to blame but themselves. Days later, I stood outside the courthouse, watching as Jake was led away in handcuffs. His trial had been swift, the evidence against him undeniable. Embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy charges had piled up, and the judge showed no mercy. Jake had tried to act defiant in the courtroom, but I saw the fear in his eyes as the sentence was handed down. 15 years in prison. As he was escorted out, our eyes met for a brief moment. His face was etched with bitterness and rage, but he said nothing. He knew there was no point. I didn't need to say anything either. The damage was done. His life, once filled with luxury and power, was now reduced to a cold cell and a long, empty stretch of years ahead. I turned away, feeling lighter than I had in months. The revenge wasn't about Jake or Megan anymore. It was about me reclaiming my life, my power. I had faced my demons, and I had won. As I walked down the courthouse steps, the sun shining brightly overhead, I realized something. I was free. Free from the pain, the betrayal, the anger. My wounds, physical and emotional, had healed, and I was ready to live again. For the first time in a long time, I smiled. Not a smile of vengeance or satisfaction, but a smile of peace. I had taken back what was mine, and now it was time to move forward. The years that followed were nothing short of a rebirth. The pain, the betrayal, the vengeance, it was all behind me now like a distant memory. I stood on the balcony of my new home, a modest but elegant villa perched on a cliff, overlooking the endless stretch of ocean. The salty breeze played with my hair as I gazed out at the horizon, where the setting sun bathed the world in hues of orange and gold. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt truly at peace. I still remembered the cold, sterile feeling of the hospital room, the weight of the casts on my body, and the searing anger that coursed through me when Jake showed me that video. It all seemed so far away now, a different lifetime. The man who lay helpless in that bed, trapped by betrayal, no longer existed. In his place stood someone stronger, someone who had taken back control of his life. One morning, a knock on the door broke the tranquility of my peaceful existence. I opened it to see Chris, my old friend and lawyer, standing there with a knowing smile. "Still enjoying paradise, I see," he said, stepping inside and glancing around. "You've done well for yourself, Alex." I shrugged. "The view helps." We sat down at the table overlooking the ocean, and I poured us both a glass of whiskey. Chris had been instrumental in helping me rebuild my life, guiding me through the legal quagmire Jake had left behind. He had also been there when I needed someone to make sense of it all. "How are things going with the business?" Chris asked, sipping his drink. I leaned back, taking in the sunset. "Better than ever. Actually, after the scandal with Jake, it took a hit, but the new investors came through. Turns out people appreciate transparency and integrity. Who knew? Chris chuckled. Jake's downfall ended up being your biggest asset. I nodded, knowing he was right. The public exposure of Jake's crimes had been brutal, but it had also shined a light on me as the victim. I had rebuilt my company from the ground up, smarter and stronger than before. Investors had flocked to support me, and with Chris's guidance, I had transformed my once battered business into a thriving enterprise. I have to admit, Chris said, swirling the whiskey in his glass, I didn't think you'd make it this far. Not after everything that happened. I smiled. Neither did I, to be honest, but I guess I'm more resilient than I thought. There was a comfortable silence between us for a moment, both of us reflecting on how far things had come. Then Chris leaned forward, his expression turning serious. Speaking of Jake, have you heard anything? I shook my head. Not much. Last I heard, he's still in prison. 15 years doesn't go by quickly, especially for someone like him. Chris sighed. I always thought Jake would get his act together eventually, but he never did. It's a shame, really. He had potential. Potential doesn't mean much without integrity, I replied. Jake had every opportunity to change, to be a better person, but he chose greed every single time. We sat in silence for a while after that, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. I didn't feel anger when I thought of Jake anymore. He had paid the price for his actions, and now his life was confined to a prison cell, a far cry from the life he had tried to steal from me. As for Megan, she had disappeared shortly after the scandal broke. I had heard rumors. Some said she moved to another country. Others said she was living in a small town under a different name. I didn't care enough to find out. In the end, she had made her choices, and those choices had led her down a path of shame and obscurity. I guess that's the way it goes, Chris said, breaking the silence. Some people rise, and others fall. I nodded, finishing my whiskey. Yeah, I just didn't think I'd be the one standing on top after everything. Chris stood up, smiling. You deserve it, Alex. After everything you've been through, you earned this peace. He left shortly after that, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I walked back out onto the balcony, letting the warm evening breeze wash over me. The sun had dipped below the horizon now, leaving the sky painted with streaks of pink and purple. It was beautiful. The following day, I received a letter from the prison where Jake was serving his sentence. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it, curious but wary of what he had to say. It had been years since we last spoke, and part of me wondered if I should even bother reading it. But in the end, I opened it. Alex, the letter began. I've had a lot of time to think in here. I've had time to realize how badly I screwed up, not just with the business, but with you. I betrayed you, and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. I don't expect you to forgive me. I wouldn't if I were you, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I wish I could go back and change things. I wish I could be a better brother, but it's too late for that now. I hope you find happiness, wherever you are. I hope you can put the past behind you. I know I'll never get that chance. I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it back in the envelope. I didn't feel any pity for Jake, nor did I feel satisfaction from his apology. What I felt was closure. He was right, it was too late for him to change things. And while I had moved on, Jake would always be stuck in the mess he created for himself. A few months later, I sold my business, cashing in on years of hard work and rebuilding. I didn't need the money anymore, but it wasn't about that. It was about closing another chapter and opening a new one. I used the money to travel the world, to experience things I had never allowed myself to experience before. I hiked mountains, swam in oceans, and found solace in the beauty of the world around me. The weight of the past had lifted, and I was free to live my life without the shadow of betrayal hanging over me. Years passed, and life became simple. I never remarried, though I had relationships. None of them were built on revenge or rebuilding broken trust. They were simply about companionship, sharing moments, and finding joy in the little things. Standing on the balcony, watching the ocean stretch out before me, I took a deep breath. The waves had always brought me peace, reminding me that life goes on, no matter the storm. I had survived the worst of it, And now I stood on the other side, stronger and freer than I had ever been. The sun had set completely now, and the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky. I smiled, content. I had faced my demons, conquered them, and come out the other side. The past was just that, the past. And I was finally ready to embrace the future.